Thanks for staying with us on The World Now. The situation in Hong Kong is still a no retreat, no surrender. Just as protesters are not backing down, the police is not resting on its hours to make protesters retreat. Hong Kong leader Carrie Lam has described the protesters as extremely selfish for intending to paralyze the country.
In yet another day of protests, more than 1,000 demonstrators, many with face masks, rallied in the central business district, blocking roads. Protesters are seen collecting bricks and javelins after police fired tear gas at a university campus. The protesters seem to be angered by the continued inaction of the government. The police is bent on tackling the situation as they used water cannons to disperse protesters in Mong Kong district on Monday, following a weekend of clashes across the Chinese ruled territory. Protesters also threw petrol bombs at police on university campuses, marking a dramatic escalation in more than 5 months of often violent pro-democracy unrest. Hong Kong leader Carrie Lam, however, describes protesters' attempts to paralyze the city as selfish.
The protesters intending to paralyze Hong Kong, stop Hong Kong, and make people unable to go to work or school are extremely selfish. At this very tough moment, Hong Kong people of all walks of life are holding to their positions, giving no chance to the violent protesters, and persisting in going to their work and school. I would like here to extend my respect to them.
She also adds that the government is trying its best to provide a safe and high-quality environment for local people.
The SAR government's transport department will keep a close eye on the current situation while taking corresponding measures. We will keep the locals updated on the traffic conditions. The SAR government hopes to provide a safe and high-quality environment for the local people to continue their daily lives as soon as possible.
With more than 260 people arrested on Monday, the police say it brings the total to more than 3,000 since the protests escalated in June.
Now, a journalist, Wan Wasum, joins me via Skype from Hong Kong to discuss the issues in that city. Many thanks to you, Wan Wasum, for joining us. Now, what do you make of the unprecedented level of violence in the protests in Hong Kong?
Well, it has been escalating still over these days because protesters is trying to go on for a strike in Hong Kong. Actually, the university have cancelled classes 2 days in a row, but still cannot stop students coming out. And even now, besides the tear gassing in the central business district, the standoff is still going on until late night in the university campus. And this is the first time police have entered to a university campus to make arrest of the students.
One of the protesters was shot, yesterday during that protest. Police say is under investigation. Is there any word concerning that investigation at the moment?
No details of the investigation have been disclosed yet, but the police have said the policemen have acted according to the guidance of the police, and he is in danger in protecting his own safety, and because protesters are trying to get his gun. So basically, the police is saying that he is acting on police guidance. But he has now stopped serving at the front and start taking leaves for that particular policeman. And the young people who were shot yesterday have turned into serious condition instead of critical. So he is improving right now.
All right. One was soon. Just allow me put you on hold for a while. We're also now joined by a security analyst, Dr. Kash Ononuju. He's joining us from Abuja. And let me ask you, Dr. Kash, what do you also make of these unprecedented levels of violence in the protest?
Well, what I think I could say is they started as an anti-extradition protest. I think the protests have now taken a new life of their own. And what we're now seeing is angst against the government. And I believe Ms. Lam has more powers. She needs to have a capacity to react to the people in Hong Kong and not to wait for instructions to come from mainland China before she could do anything. I think she's now beginning to have that test we believe ultimately was going to come in between those in Hong Kong and the government in mainland China. What we right now have is no more the anti-immigration protest. No, this is now a protest against Ms. Lam, her weakness, and the fact that people in Hong Kong believe that Ms. Lam is being teleguided right from mainland China. And I think the things are beginning now to take a new way. You can see the economy is undermined, the airport
Dr.
shut,
Kash,
and
I want to get something clear. Just sorry to butt in. You were saying that this is no longer a protest, for democracy in Hong Kong, but a protest against the government.
Yes, it is no more an anti-extradition protest. No, it is now a protest against the visible signs that Ms. Lam does not have control to actually rule Hong Kong. She now has to manufacture a new Lam that has to react to the people as they do protest. Not a Lam that will wait to get instructions from China before she will now do this. Don't forget, it is because of the damage to the economy in Hong Kong that the Chinese government is recently propping the internet company, Alibaba, to try to bring to Hong Kong the listings of up to 10 billion shares. But I think you will need to have more than behaviors like Alibaba putting 10 billion listings on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange for the economy of Hong Kong to actually withstand the new wave of anti-government, that's what I said, anti-government protest in Hong Kong.
She has called the protesters selfish, and we saw that one of the anti-government protesters, was set on, or pro-Beijing protesters was set on fire by anti-government protesters. One would assume, do you agree with Carrie Lam at this moment that these protesters are now being selfish?
Well, I would say they're kind of both sides are kind of out of control, and some individual radical people are doing radical things. And, the police and the protesters are getting more and more violent confrontation. So it would be more difficult for the government to resolve the problem. At the very beginning, we were asking for an independent inquiry to look at all the investigations of all the police brutality or misuse of force. But right now, it's 5 months now. And even the existing mechanism is not going to solve all the investigations. And they are saying that even an investigation, individual independent investigation, is somehow unlikely to solve the problem right away, even if it is established. Not to mention that the Ms. Carrie Lam is having a very strong stance on the protester, and no sign of softening the line have been seen so far. And everybody is now seeing how the election coming up in 2 weeks will go on. If it's going to cancel, so I think the protester will step up even more radical actions, and all the world are seeing how this can be resolved. So Carrie Lam have a very big burden on her shoulder, because even the central government would like her to handle these matters, to not to set an example for other people in China. So it will be a very difficult case if things goes on, and if she refuse to kind of back down on some demands on the Protestant.
All right. Let's go to Dr. Catch now. You are a security analyst, and we know that on the economic front, Hong Kong is set to be on the brink of recession, contracting annually by 4% to 4.5%. That's just on the economic front. What damage does this pose for Hong Kong in terms of security?
Well, in security, I think still security-wise, Hong Kong is fine. What we're beginning to see now is that you can actually use the protests to induce, as we've seen in this particular case, a recession. And that's why you're seeing with the airline stocks and other stocks taking a hammering, that you've seen the Chinese government trying to get Alibaba to bring in 10 billion of listings on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange. I believe this, not just having the economic capacity to undermine the economy, but we are now asking for, is Ms. Lam able, or is Beijing able to allow Hong Kong govern itself? This is where I believe we are right now. The Chinese government must allow that two system, could they say it, one country, two system, to actually take its shape today in Hong Kong and allow Hong Kong to be truly autonomous on its own and self-governing.
All right, one more assume, what reconciliatory steps should Hong Kong be taking at this moment, all parties involved be taking at this moment, to forestall this violence?
Yeah,
I think that's actually the underlying
Dr.
argument in all...
one was assume that question was for you.
Yeah, that's for me, right? So I think everybody plays a part in kind of calming down the situation. The pro-democratic legislator is asking people to be more rational as the election is coming, and they can actually show their views by their votes, and it is the most rational way of doing it. And as violence goes on, and international world will try to will get a different impression for the protest so far, because Hong Kong have been recognized as a very rational and peaceful society before, but now people are getting more violent scenes right now in Hong Kong almost every day. So it will harm the international image of Hong Kong quite significantly. So even the pro-Beijing politician is also asking people to sort of calm down, so that they can, because of the election is coming, if they still have a lot of fights, so they are going to get more favorable in the election. So both parties are kind of trying to calm down the situation. But the essence is in the government. The government have not so far been putting a softer approach to deal with the protesters. So they still stay on a very firm hand, and the government have depend very much on the police force to carry out the breaking down of the protests. So it will become a vicious cycle that the police use more violence, and the protesters are getting more radical, and the police will use even more violence. And so that would make Hong Kong to a very difficult situation.
Journalist Wan Wasum and security analyst Dr. Cash Ononiju, many thanks to both of you for sharing your thoughts with us on this issue.